Let's get started. All right. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Bhagavad Gita. We are on chapter 16. This is the conclusion of chapter 16. So we're going to go start with verses 19 through 24. We're going to have two readings in English, followed by Yogeshwar's comments on it. And then we're going to open it up for any questions or comments. That's the plan. So let's start with David. David, if you could read 19 through 24.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant. Verse 19. Those envious, cruel, evil, lowest of mankind, verily I hurl perpetually into the cycle of birth and death, into the wombs of the demoniac. O Arjuna, entering demoniac wombs birth after birth, these fools receive an even more abominable destination, unable to achieve me. The three kinds of doorways to hell are lust, anger, and greed. Therefore, these three are so destructive to the embodied self, must be abandoned. O Arjuna, a person being liberated from these three doorways of nescience performs austerities for the embodied self, therefore reaching the supreme goal. One who transgresses the injunctions of the Vedic scriptures, whimsically acting under the impulse of desire, never attains perfection, neither happiness nor the supreme goal. Therefore, the injunctions of the Vedic scriptures in ascertaining what should be done and what should not be done are your authority. Knowing the ordinance of the Vedic scriptures as prescribed, you should perform actions in the world as a matter of duty.
Thank you, David. I'm going to read from Sri Aurobindo's translation. Again, this is 19 through 24 of chapter 16. These proud haters of good and of God, evil, cruel, vilest among men of the world, I cast down continually into more and more Asuric births. Cast into Asuric wombs, deluded birth after birth, they find me not, as they do not seek me, and sink down into the lowest status of soul nature. Threefold are doors of hell: destructive of the soul, desire, wrath, and greed. Therefore, let man renounce these three. A man liberated from these doors of darkness, O son of Kunti, follows his own higher good and arrives at the highest soul status. He who, having cast aside the rules of the Shastra, follows the promptings of desire, attaineth not the perfection, nor happiness, nor the highest soul status. Therefore, let Shastra be thy authority in determining what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, knowing what hath been declared by the rules of the Shastra, thou ought to work in this world. Yogeshwar?
Tanaham dishata kruran sansareshu naradhaman Shipamya jasram ashubhan ashuri shrevayonishu. Krishna here is telling Arjuna that those that I have described in detail, was this the greater part of this chapter has been the qualities of those who are asuri in nature. What are those qualities? Some of them are those that they do not go with the truth. They are always pulled by their desires rather than being able to control their desires. They're always pulled by their mind, manorath. And they themselves, they do all the good things, for example, charity, or even yajnas or anything to do with going towards the path of the ultimate. They do that, but how do they do it? Nama yajna instead. They only do it for the name of the yajna or just for the name of charity, but they do not take the essence of charity together. They do not take the essence of the good qualities together. Such people who are mam atma paradeheshu paradvishanto abhyasuyaka, which is a line from the 18th verse, just above this verse. So such people, they are not only for themselves, but even for others. They are pradvishanta. They are not doing the right thing. So they are harmful to themselves. That is one thing. They are also harmful to the environment, to the people around them. Because if a person is angry, yeah, that anger is transferred to the person who sees that person. Now, the other person will have a spark of anger. You'll also be like, if this person is angry, I should tell him something in such a tone. So you see the way how even one person being angry in a room can make other people's mental states in a different way. So not only for himself is it dangerous for him to be angry, but it's also disturbing to other people as well. Not only that as well, but even for the ultimate that is staying within each and every one, it is dangerous, it's harmful. And what is he doing? Pradvishanto abhyasuyaka. They are continuously damaging, they're continuously harmful to all this. And if you're continuously harmful to your own eternal principle, to your own eternal nature, then you'll never be able to reach it. You'll never be able to want, you'll never even have the desire to go to it. That's why Krishna here is saying in the 19th verse that Tanaham dushatah kruran sansareshu naradman kshipamya jasrama shubhan asuri shweva yonihi. Such people, what do I do to them? Krishna here is saying that I myself, to such people, I put them into different wombs of asuri types. Yeah? Now, we have to understand this. Krishna himself puts these people into these different types of wombs. So the first thing is, what is the womb that Krishna is putting into? Just imagine a person who is right now normal, totally normal. And then after like 10 years, you meet the same friend that you had, and he's depressed. Is that person the same as you met him 10 years back? Or is he somebody who is different now? Like totally. His views of the world and his mind, everything, even his body, because of the depression. It's not when you are continuously against your eternal principle, your eternal nature, what happens to you? You always go constantly away from your own nature. You're always drifting away from your own nature. Then what happens? You may be in the same body, but you become another person totally. You become another type of person. And we also saw that Krishna said one quality of those who are going away from their eternal nature is also chintama parimeyam cha, pralayantam cha upashita. That they take so much depression within themselves, so much thought, and they always have these depressive thoughts about themselves, about the environment, about the world. That is why Krishna here is saying that I put them into different wombs. Now, when you're having any type of illness, for example, even like mental illness, like depression, there is a phase that you go through in the middle, which is like a womb, which is like a womb. It doesn't allow you to go out of the depression. It binds you into the depression. It makes a cover over you, and you can't see past that cover. Well, the whole world may be happy, but if you are depressed, then within that womb, you will see everything through your own lens, nothing else. That is why Krishna here is saying that I put them into these different wombs, which are asuri of nature. And now Krishna here is putting another point that I myself do this. How does he do that? Just a normal example I'd like to give is, normally we see that if I would ask, what uh, brings down the apple from the tree? We'll say gravity. Yeah? But does gravity really do it, like put a hand on top of it and then do it? No. Gravity is just a law. And whatever is within that law, it will be considerate about that law. It will happen according to the law. Here Krishna is saying that I do it. And there we are saying that gravity does it. So it's the same there. It's not that Krishna goes there and then puts him into a womb like that. But this is a natural law, natural principle, whereby if you yourself, you're of an asuric nature, you'll continuously go in circles within that asuri nature. You'll have a womb created by your own self. And that point is important, that Krishna is doing it. But what is it that he's doing? It is, Krishna is just a principle, an eternal principle. And he's saying that if we say gravity does it, then even here it is like a principle that Krishna does it. Doesn't mean that he puts his hands into it. It means that he just allows for it to happen because you want it. Because you are doing it, you will have it happen. And since it's just a law, if you go by it, then you're going towards that direction. And then you move in circles and circles, like a clock face and the hands in the clock face. The hands in the clock face, if the second hand is moving so fast, we'll say maybe it's reaching somewhere. But what happens is they don't reach anywhere. However fast or slow you move within circles, you're only going to get nowhere, in the same place only. And what happens with psychology, rather than a clock face, like clock face, at least it has a use, but what happens with the human brain, like how it gets all this information, is it will get all this information from outside. It will have its own thoughts now. And then it will make its own thoughts as predominant. And that's what it will base on. Now, if your own thoughts are of depression, of ignorance, and of anger, a path that you've walked before is easier to walk back at any point in time. For example, the first time a person thinks about stealing something, it's a bit hard. It's not that easy. But the next time it's easier. The third time it's even easier. And then it just becomes easier and easier. The same thing happens with any characteristic within our brain. Whether it's anger, the first time it may feel weird that why did I get angry? The second time it's a bit fine. Then third, fourth time it's like it's part of me now. I can't leave it. So the same thing happens. Now, Krishna is saying that happens, and know that that happens. If you get into a constant habit, then it will just allow you to be in that habit. You'll go in circles within that habit. And that is what Krishna is saying. Asuri shweva yonishu. Asurim yonimapanna mudha janmani janmani mama prapyaiva kaunteya tato yatya dhamam ghatim. What happens after that? Once you've gone into that perspective of Asuri nature, it's really hard for you to get out of that nature. And there's also one thing that we are always like, when we get into a thing like depression, it's not your nature, it's not your swabhava. If not, you'll always be in that swabhava. But it's not your swabhava to get into depression. Still, when we get into depression, sometimes we feel like, oh, I can't live it now. It's tied me down. What should I do? So that's what Krishna is trying to say here, that Asurim yonimapanna mudha janmani janmani. Once you get into that step, whether it is becoming angry always, like constantly getting angry, or it is about getting into depression, such things, now you will continuously, that ignorant person will continuously go in circles within the samsara, within all the material world. But he will miss the point. What is the point? Mama pratyaiva kaunteya tato yatya dhamam gatim. The point he will miss is the eternal principle. What is always there, he will not be able to see, because there's something disturbing your mind, and that disturbing is more dominant than something that is of nature. For example, when we're even seated, silence sometimes disturbs us because we can't stay in silence. We need some noise, or we need to listen to something. We need a trigger from outside. That trigger is not really needed if we understand it. What happens is we can sit as we are, but we are not used to doing. We're always used to having triggers around ourselves. We're always used to having some emotion within ourselves. When we are having these emotions within ourselves, we see that, like the water, once it has a wave, it just continues making the wave until the wave continuously fades away. But what happens to us is we can't make a wave only once. We want to continuously making wave. That's our need, that's our desire. We can't have our mind stable. Since we have practiced that over and over again, first of all, it's hard to make it stable. And when we get into an environment whereby we can make it stable, we are ourselves uneasy in that environment. We feel that there's something missing. The stimuli are missing. We can't stay with ourselves. We can't stay with just the eternal principle, which is all around us. And that is one thing that we miss, which is always there, but we miss it because we always want stimuli from outside. We can't allow what is to be.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. I want to make two comments. One, I want to make the point that you have made multiple times, that when Krishna is talking about these eternal cycles, the same principles, this is a psychological principle as well. So if you do good things during a day, you wake up the next day in a better state. If you do bad things one day, next day you wake up, in a worse state. So there is a psychological reality to these cycles. So just first point, and which applies not at the level just across lifetimes, but in a very real way in your psychology. The second point, this is a clarification this is elaboration from Sri Aurobindo. I want to read this out because I think he's very good at commenting on what Krishna is intending. He says this graphic description, even giving its entire value to the distinction it implies, must not be pressed to carry more in it than it means. When it is said that there are two creations of beings in this material world, Deva and Asura, it is not meant that human souls are so created by God from the beginning, each with its own inevitable career in nature. Nor is it meant that there is a rigid spiritual predestination, and those rejected from the beginning by the divine are blinded by him, so that they may be thrust down to eternal perdition and impurity of hell. All souls are eternal portions of the divine and the Asura as well. All souls are eternal portions of the divine, the Asura as well as Deva. All can come to salvation. Even the greatest sinner can turn to the divine. But the evolution of the soul in nature is an adventure of which swabhava, that your own nature, and the karma governed by the swabhava are ever the chief powers. And if an excess in manifestation of the swabhava, the self-becoming of the soul, a disorder in its play turns the law of being to the perverse side. If the rajasic qualities are given the upper hand, cultured to the diminution of sattva, then trend of the karma and its results necessarily culminate, not in the sattvic heights, which is capable of movement, of liberation, but in the highest exaggeration of perversities of lower nature. So that's the point I wanted to make. Please go ahead.
त्रिविधं नरकस्येदं द्वारं नाशनमात्मनः काम क्रोधस्तथा लोभस्तस्मादेतत्त्रयं त्यजेत्. There are three doors to the depletion of the Atman. Now, when Krishna here is saying that three doors, when we know something and then a metaphor is put on top of it, it is beautiful. What happens at other times is when the metaphor is put on it and we do not know the actual thing, we try to think that the metaphor is describing the real thing. And without a metaphor, things are not as said as they should be. Because as we have seen in Gita, in chapter 10, in chapter 9, all those chapters have these different metaphors of how everything should evolve, of where you should look for the eternal principle, how it is. And we can see that without these metaphors, it was really hard to understand where to look for the eternal principle, how it manifests in front of our eyes. Once we have been able to see that, then we know that these metaphors are useful because they show us what the principle is. The same is going here, whereby Krishna is saying, Dwara, these are doors to the depletion of the Atman. What we need to know is, one thing Krishna knows is Atman never depletes. It never fades away. It never dies. Because he himself has said, Achedyoyam Abhedyoyam in chapter 2 about the Atman. He here is saying that what is the Nash of Atman? what is the depletion of Atman, or what is the death of Atman? The death of Atman is such a thing that if you're constantly going away from the center, because you can't go directly, it's not a direct route. You go in circles away from the center, as we have looked from the diagram of Shrikant. So when you go in circles away from the center, and those circles become rigid, there is kind of no way of getting back. It's like it's become your habit to go away from the center. What is the death of the Atman? It is a position in which you are not acting from the Atman. You're not acting from the eternal principle. For you, there is no Atman because you cannot work from it. There's no practical way that you are using the Atman. So for you, there is no Atman. In that way, the Atman has died away for you. And this is said as the three doors. What three doors are there that allow you to go away from the center more towards the peripheral? These three doors are kama, krodha, lobha. Lobha is greed, as you know. Krodha is anger, and kama is desire. These three things take you away from the center towards the peripheral. So first thing, one is desire. Desire on its own takes you away from the center towards the peripheral. It takes you away from your own swabhava. What is desire? Anything that attaches you towards the peripheral in a way that when you're looking towards the peripheral, it looks beautiful. When you have a desire about something, you don't have a desire of something that doesn't look beautiful to you. You never have a desire of something that you feel is crude. Desires always come about when you feel something is greater than you, when you feel something is better than you, when you feel something is more beautiful. What is karma? It is the looking at the peripheral as if it's greater than you. Because you in this perspective is not what we are right now, but the center itself. So contrasting both of them, what is karma? What is desire? Desire is a state in which you look at the peripheral, that it is greater than you, it is bigger than you, it is more valuable than the center itself. That is when you have a desire to move away from the center towards the peripheral. If you feel something is greater than you, and in a way it's bigger than you, why would you want to move away from it? You'll want to stick to it. You'll want to stay there. So this is what desire is. When you're looking at something that is outside there, at the peripheral, and you're saying, this is greater than me. Krodha. Now, that which is greater than you, that which you think is greater than you, the peripheral which you think is greater than the center, when somebody disturbs you in the middle, that I don't give you this, or another person takes it away from you, something that you feel is greater, and another person is taking it away from you, you will get angry at them. That is the growth element. All these three base on the same principle. Whether it's desire, whether it's anger, or it's greed, you should see the peripheral as greater, more valuable than the center. That is when this can happen. The essence of Mahatmya, and Mahatmya in Sanskrit means greatness. in English. So when you see the greatness of the peripheral, that's what you attach to, then all these three will happen. Low greed. Now in greed, we know that you have taken something so great. You feel that that thing is so greater than you that you can't live without. When it's taken away from you, your life is gone. Like a person who is so greedy, if his money is taken away from him, it's like his identity has been grabbed from him. It's been taken away. He can't live his life. These three are all put on the same principle. But since it's really hard for us to get to that principle, that is, these three doors are shown, that these are the three ways you get away from the center. And when you're doing any of them, look for the underlying principle. Why are you being angry? Why are you having a desire to go towards the peripheral, not towards the center? Why are you greedy about something? When you're having these emotions, when you're having these feelings, just be there and think about them. What is it? Just look at these emotions. What are they? What happens is these emotions happen and we roll around with them rather than looking at them with perspective. When we look at them, when we think about them, we really get the gist of them. And something doesn't have to be so big for you to get the essence behind it. Even something so small, whereby the anger may not have come out from your mouth or through your actions. The anger may just have been in your mind. Still, it is that much that you can be able to see that this is anger and why is it happening? What am I attached to that I am getting angry? Now, taking that attachment, this attachment, is it so great that I can sacrifice the center for this attachment? Then you just grade both of them, weigh both of them, weigh your options. When we don't have a possibility of weighing our options is when we go wrong. When we have the possibility and we are able to weigh the options, then we always get it right. And when we weigh the options, we know that what is more beneficial, what is better, what is the better road to is towards the center. It's towards my own nature rather than just going outside towards the peripheral. When I'm going towards my own nature, I'm not only helping myself, I'm also helping people around me do the same thing. And I am also helping the eternal nature itself, the eternal principle itself. Because if I get to the eternal principle itself will show itself to me. That is being benevolent towards the eternal principle. That is showing your love towards the eternal principle. Because when you show love towards something, it's not about getting it into your grip. It is about experiencing it, experiencing the person. When you love somebody, it's not about having him do as you wish, but it is all about allowing them to be with you. However they are, you're accepting in love. That is what love is. So when you love the center, automatically you get to know the greatness of the center. It's both ways. When you know the greatness of the center, you also get a bond of love between you. And when you're constantly going towards the center, whether it's through knowing the greatness or just through sheer love, when you get to the center, you will know that all this that is outside of the peripheral is just specks of dust. They are there. It's not that those things are not there. They are there. But what is more valuable to reach? What is greater is something that you love, is something that you see is great. And when you're at the center, you have reached it through love or through greatness or through any other means, then you really know that this is something that I have gotten. And it's not just a feeling. When you get there, you realize that this is not just a feeling like any other emotion. It's also not just a thought, because this is consciousness itself. It is life itself. It is not something that is outside of life, or it's not something that is constructed by your mind. Rather, it is the essence itself. Then you get the point why Krishna is saying, Tasmat etatrayam tyaja. There is a point whereby Krishna is saying, leave these three so that you get to the center. But there's also another point whereby Krishna is telling you something higher, that know the greatness of the center. These three will just fade away. You don't even, you'll leave them in a way. But then it's not that the way you leave them will be a constraint for you. It will just be automatic, that it will be like as if they have left you rather than you leaving. And anything where Krishna is saying, Tasmadeta Prem Tyaja, there is an example that is normally given. A saint went to a certain village, and there were all these different types of alcohol and smoking, cigarettes, and all that was happening there. When he tries to tell them that don't get addicted to these things, because the material, they won't be able to take you towards the ultimate. What they said is that, what do I do? This alcohol is not living. What should I do? Yeah, because if I feel that I want to leave it today, then tomorrow it will call me back. What Krishna here is saying, that it is the same perspective with ourselves. This karma, krodha, and lobha, the desire, the anger, and the greed, is not part of us. And they are not holding us. What Krishna is saying is just leave it on its own. Don't pull it with you. Don't drag it with you. That is the only condition. When you don't drag it with you, you realize that it is just something that falls into its own place. It is there, but something that is greater is at the center, is at the core of life, is at the ultimate principle. एतैर्विमुक्तः कौन्तेय तमोद्वारैस्त्रिभिर्नरः आचरत्यात्मनः श्रेयस्ततो याति परां गतिम्. एतैर्विमुक्तः. If a person is freed from the bondage of these three, desire, anger, and greed, Krishna is saying to Arjuna that what are these three? Tamo dwari tribhir nara. These three are like the roads towards tamas. Tamas meaning darkness. Tamas meaning ignorance. So tamas is translated in two ways. If you take it as an opposite of light, because tamas is an opposite of light. That's the normal definition, like one definition to give it, the opposite of light. Then when you take it literally as the opposite of light, you'll see that it's darkness. Then another perspective to it is that knowledge is light. And when knowledge is light, the opposite of it, which is ignorance, is tama. So tama is also translated as ignorance. These three are the roads towards ignorance. They're the roads away from the eternal principle. They are the roads away from life itself. When you get free from the bondage of these three, Acharatyatmana Shreyas Tato Yati Param Gati. What happens just by living these three? You automatically start doing things that allow your Atman to benefit on its own. Shreyas meaning anything that you do that allows you to go towards the Atman, to get towards the eternal principle, to get towards life itself, to understand consciousness itself. When you live these three is when you'll understand the deeper meaning of life, what consciousness means. And how to do it is not directly going into consciousness. Because what will happen is these three will be pulling you from behind towards the peripheral. First, you have to leave them. Sometimes we feel that, oh, what should I do? I get angry all the time. What should I do? But it's the same thing. It is in your hand to become angry, and it's in your hand to be peaceful. If we know how our brain works, our mind works, how our thoughts work, and how our emotions work, then we're able to know what is desire, what is anger, and how can I just leave them in their own place, not drag them with me. And when they're left to their own place, I am free from their bondage. It's like having a bag with you, yes? And when you're in a train, you're saying that I should carry the bag on my head. Why? I don't want this bag to be on the train. I want to keep it with me. What if I lose it? That's how we are looking at it. Well, Krishna is saying here that leave the bag on the train, like leave it in the cabin. It will come with you. Don't worry about it. Yeah? Because if it is your swabhav, it will come with you. Don't worry about it. Just leave it there. So what we are trying to do is, I don't want to leave it because I may lose it. And so I should carry it on my head. That's what we're trying to do. And what Krishna here is saying that, oh, all these desires, just leave them. If they are your swabhava, they will come with you. And if they're not, then you don't need them. Yeah? So whatever happens after leaving them, allow it to happen. Well, don't carry it on your head. At least keep it on the train, because you know it will come with you. And by doing this, after having been relieved from this great weight over your own shoulders, over your own head, then you realize that there's something greater to go towards. If something is not pulling you backwards, then you also have the speed or the energy to go in front, to go frontwards, because something is not pulling you from the behind. Krishna here is saying that automatically you will go towards the Shreya, and tato yati param gati. After that, he goes towards the paragati. He goes towards that path that is the ultimate. He goes towards that, the goal, which is the ultimate. Yah shastra vidhi mutsrijya vartate kamakarata nasa siddhim avapnoti na sukham na param gatim. Those who do not follow the essence of the Shastras, the essence of the scriptures, and they do all the activities, all the action, all the karma through their desires, kamakarata. What happens to them? Nasa siddhim avapnoti. They do not get any siddhi. Siddhi meaning any greatness within this world as well. Na sukham. They also don't get peace, and they do not get param gatim. They do not get the ultimate path. They do not get the ultimate goal. What does Shastra Vidhi mean? What does the essence of the scriptures mean? What scripture itself means? At the time Krishna is saying this, because at the time Krishna is saying this, one thing to note in Indian history is that those who used to write were only those who were enlightened. And those are the only people who used to write. And we used to call them by a title named Vyasa. So at the time Krishna is saying this, they are only the Vedas, they're only the Upanishads, which are in written form by Vyasa. Krishna here is saying that if you follow these scriptures, not that anybody can write scriptures at that time, only those who have reached right. Yeah? And only those who have reached say all these words about the ultimate, about how to get there, like Krishna is doing to Arjuna. That is Shastra. That is the scripture. Now, not also holding on to the scripture itself, because Krishna has not just said Shastra Mutsrijya. Krishna has said Shastra Vidhi Mutsrijya. Now, Vidhi means the essence of the Shastra itself, the essence of the scripture. What is it trying to say? For example, Krishna says that in the Asuri qualities, Yajante Nama Yajniste, they do what is said in the scriptures. That's fine. But they do not get the essence of the scripture itself. They do charity, but away from the essence of the scripture. They do the yajna, they do the sacrifices, but away from the essence of the scriptures. Leaving out the essence, only doing the action. For example, when we say thank you, or please, or sorry, like something as simple as sorry, sometimes we just say it for the other person. Yeah? We don't say it because we are truly sorry about it. Like, I should not really have done this, and I've done wrong to you, so I'm really sorry about this. Our words sometimes are just words, just because it is social norm that I should say sorry. But you're leaving out the essence of the word, which means that from your heart, you should really feel that I'm sorry, I should not really have done this. I've done wrong unto him. And when you leave out the essence of the word itself, but you just say the word, the other person may feel that it has the essence, but slowly by slowly, your own self, you start becoming empty of the essence. Because you'll always have a way of saying the word without the essence itself. And what is interesting is whenever any word is first gotten to, or any sacrifice or any type of charity is first gotten to, it has the essence fully in itself. Like, just imagine the first time, or the first times people were saying sorry or thank you. They were really grateful when they were saying thank you. They had the essence of the heart within themselves. They were saying that I am grateful that you're here and you've done something for me that I could not have done on my own. And when that thank you comes with the essence, you're doing it with the essence of the word, not just the word itself. The same goes to anything in any scripture, not just the action, but the essence behind the action. Something that takes you towards the ultimate, something that takes you towards the center is what is meant. For example, charity. What happens in charity? Or what happens in a sacrifice? You are giving away something that doesn't help you on the path. When you're sacrificing, you're giving away something that doesn't help you on the path of going towards the ultimate. That is what you're sacrificing. Yeah? And what is left onto you is something that takes you towards the path of the ultimate. Now, what has happened in sacrifice is that, oh, I have this extra much, allow it to be sacrificed. Like I'll just give it in donation or whatever. It's not about that only. It's about the essence of charity, whereby you feel this person is in need and you give that donation to him. And then you see the smile on their face. There's something distinct to it, whereby you give a donation. Like, for example, when there's so many little kids who are poor in Africa. And when you give a donation to them, when you give them some food, they're hungry. When you give them some food, you see the light within their eyes. You see the light of what donation is supposed to do. It's supposed to brighten up another life as well. And that brightening up another life also brings something towards you. It lights you up. And when you light up, you realize that there is something at the essence. Not just the donation for the family, or not just the donation that we go to do and we have a camera behind us, or even the donations that we are always doing, but then we're also taking selfies with ourselves to put on Instagram. So we are giving the donation, we are doing the act, but sometimes we're missing the essence because our focus or our attention is towards how many likes I may get on Instagram or Facebook, or how many people see my photo that have given a donation. So that's where focus and attention is. You'll miss out the brightness in the eyes of the other person to whom you've given the donation. You'll miss out the brightness that you should feel when you're giving the donation. And that brightness brings a number of power towards you. It brings that, it doesn't bring a greatness within you, like I am greater than him. It doesn't bring that at all. That light brings a number of power. It brings that essence onto you that I am grateful that I got to give this charity to this person. That's how you feel. And when that happens, you understand that the essence of the scripture or the essence of that action has been fulfilled within that action. So what happens when you do not get the essence of the scriptures? What will you be doing? You will be walking from your desires. And when you're walking from your desires, because what your desires are always towards the outside, towards the peripheral. Your desires are never towards your own center. And since they're always towards the peripheral, they will attach you towards the peripheral. Nasa siddhim avapnoti. You will see that the people get fame, but when, like siddhi, fame is like a siddhi. It's like something that you've gotten in this material world. It's a siddhi. When you get the fame, and then you continue doing things just for the fame, you realize that there's a peak in it, and then there's also a part where you go down. While you're doing the same thing, you may even be doing more marketing than you were doing before. But because the essence has gone away, you're slowly going down. And that Krishna is saying, Nasa siddhim avapnoti. Even in this world, you won't find greatness because people will see that he was not doing donations for the people. He was just doing donations for the fame. And what will people do then? They won't give him the fame that he wants. Nasukha. You'll also never get the peace. Because just imagine the peace that comes when you're grateful that you've been given the opportunity to give charity to this person. That gratefulness within yourself. The essence of the scripture of charity. That brings a kind of peace within you. Peace of mind. Bliss within yourself. So what happens when you're going by your desires? You miss out this peace. You miss it out totally. It doesn't come to you. Or if it comes, it only comes to the extent that you have left your desire. That's the only much it comes. Na param gatim. Krishna is saying, you will never reach the center. You will never know the essence of life. You'll never be able to get to the consciousness of life. Tasmat shastram pramanam te karya karya vyavasthito yatva shastra vidhanoktam karma kartumiharhasi. That is why Krishna is saying, you should hold the shastras, you should hold the scriptures as pramanam. You should hold them as greater than you, and that they know the truth. Because at the time Krishna is saying this, all written literature that is there at this time, there is nothing that is out of a person who is not enlightened. Everything is out of a person who is enlightened. So know it, because if a person who is enlightened is saying, he doesn't have any desires, he doesn't want any femme, so why is he writing this scripture? He's writing it for the other people. That is the greatness of him, because he himself is fulfilled. And when you're doing it for another person now, that is when you call it a shastra. That is when you call it a scripture. When you're not doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for the other person, because the person himself is fulfilled and wants to get the other person to the same state of being. You should keep the scriptures and know that this is something that I should do, and this is something that I should not do. Karya karya vyavasthito. You should understand what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. And the other thing is that those scriptures have all the swabhava of the people within themselves, like the Vedas. Yeah? They will talk about this perspective of people having these different swabhavas. It will also talk about the perspective of the eternal. Then it will also talk about the perspective of the gunas, how they came to be, of the three qualities of the Prakriti. So all these together, you understand that the scriptures are something that have the essence of life. Not just a person who wants to get to Paramgati, or not just a person who wants to get to the center should follow scriptures, but even a person who wants to just be in this world and be happy, fruitful, should also follow the scriptures, because he will be able to know his own essence, his own swabhava. And by knowing who you are, you're able to do good upon yourself and the society at large. So, Gyatva Shastra Vidhanoktam Karma Kartumiharasi. When are you able to do the right action? Is when you know what Vijnana the scriptures are giving you, what knowledge the scriptures are giving you. Because one thing we should understand is that we can't know everything just with our perspective as we are. There are much greater people who have written greater things than ourselves. There are people who have known greater states than ourselves. There are people who have known, who have even been to greater places than we have been. Now, what should we do if we can't get there directly? Use those scriptures that have been given. And even in the scriptures, you'll see different types of swabhavas. So get which swabhava allows you to do the right karma according to your swabhava. And when you attune with your swabhava, it's like attuning with the world itself. And when you attune with the world, everything that you do is colorful on its own. Any action that you do is colorful on its own, and it has an essence of its own. That's why Krishna can say that do karma, like do action. However, do not get attached to the fruits. And when you're not attached to the fruits, sometimes we feel that, how can I do any action without a fruit in front of me? Krishna here is saying the action itself embodies the fruit. Like the action itself gives the fruit to you. When you're giving the charity towards that person who needs it, the action itself of giving charity bears the fruit of happiness within itself. Well, while you're keeping an intention of a fruit, which is afterwards, the intention that you'll be having will be towards the peripheral, because it's never going to be towards the center, as we don't know it. And that intention will lead you away from the center. That's why Krishna can't say that do any action, but don't keep the intention of the fruit within you. Don't get attached to the fruit. And then Krishna also says, don't get attached to the action itself. Yeah, because the action is something that takes you towards the center. And if the action takes you towards the center, then go towards the center without being attached to the action as well. Well, then you will say that if I don't get attached to the action, if I don't get attached to the fruit itself, I will just not do any action. And then Krishna says, also don't get attached to non-action. You should continuously be doing action without getting attached to the action itself and without being attached to the fruit of the action. When you get the essence of action, of karma yoga itself, you get it from the scriptures. And even the scriptures are a medium. Another medium is a person who is living it out. And as we know, what is a scripture? It is something that has been taught by an enlightened person who has reached and is writing it down. Well, then, if you get to a person who has been enlightened and is living in such a way, then even his actions are a scripture, because they will show you the way action is supposed to be done, how karma yoga is supposed to be done. What he says is also a scripture, because right at the time Krishna was saying this to Arjuna, there were only words. But this is a scripture for us, right? And for Arjuna himself, this was a scripture. They were not only words by Krishna. So Arjuna took this as a scripture itself. So scriptures are not only texts that have been written prior to us. They're also living people who are scriptures themselves. Enlightened people who have reached, they show the way action is supposed to be done. Or they show the way how bhakti yoga is supposed to be done. They show the way how jnana yoga is supposed to be done. When you get to that, you really know how action is supposed to be done. And when you know that, then there will be no inaction. You'll always be in action without getting attached to anything. And that's what Krishna is saying. Karma, yoga, karma sukaushalam. It is a way of doing action. Like, imagine doing action without getting attached. That is like really a tweak that Krishna has done there. Like, it's really mind-bending. How can that happen? That's why Krishna is saying that the karma yoga is kushalata, is just an intelligent way of doing karma.
Yogeshwar, can you recite the final sentence at the end of the adhyay?
Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supnishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Devasura Sampat Vibhaga Yogo Nama Shorashodhyayah.
Thank you. Thank you. Folks, we've finished the 16th adhyay. Now you're welcome to ask questions either about this adhyay or rest of Bhagavad Gita. So we've come up to 16. We've got only 2 adhyayas left, 17 and 18. So you're welcome to ask any questions on Gita. So keep the questions about Gita. You can ask any question that you would like. Go ahead, or you can make any comments about this. And we'll go from there. Okay, so give me just a second. Okay, we're going to start with Madhav, Rupali, and Evanik. Madhav.
For me, the concept of doing an action without getting attached to the outcome is a little bit hard, because my whole life we've been doing that. So as a beginner, is it fair to say get attached to the outcome, to the actions that bring you to the center as the first part, and then eventually drop that as well?
So if we want to do it in phases, what happens is there is a risk in doing it in phases, but there is also that learning curve that happens. So know this is the concept. Know this is what we are supposed to do. And then what you do to the action itself, you do it and try to do it without any attachments towards it. What happens in the middle is a tension, because we have never been able to do that in our whole life. That tension is what Krishna calls tapa. Now, if you're able to go past that tapa as it is, then you're able to transcend. But if you're not able to, then try doing something that is easier, maybe getting attached to the action itself or the fruit. Now, there is one thing that could happen in there, is that you feel this is it because you're getting what you need from outside it. If your intentions are going past it, then you're able to go past it. But if your intentions are like, this is enough for me, like if I'm doing action and it's happening, if I'm able to do action for myself and people around me, it's fine. Then sometimes we feel like we're bound by that. We're never being able to get past it. So that should not happen. That's my only caution about it.
Thank you, Madhav. Madhav, great question. And I think just asking that question is a big step forward. Thank you. Next up is going to be Rupali, Evanik, Cecilia, and Joe. Rupali. Yes, you can ask any question about, folks, you can ask any question about Bhagavad Gita. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I was listening to the first part of the chapter 16, and it starts with the word abhaya, like getting rid of your fears. And I wanted to ask Yogeshwar if he could talk a little more about what is the root of fear and how to get rid of the fear in any situation that you may be facing. And there's the part about Sattva Sanshuddhi with the four Antakaran. So if you could just talk about that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. So as we have talked about fear previously as well, where does fear arrive from? Well, somebody will give you an antidote to fear, that try doing things that you fear. That's one way, that's fine. Like you'll get used to doing them, and then you'll have that fear degrade as time goes by. But what I would like to put to the table is that try getting non-attached from your own self, as you know your own self right now. Because the self as we know right now is the body, the mind, the emotions, the thoughts, all that, or your intellect. Now, when we are able to get past that, like when we're able not to identify ourselves with that, and we're something different from that, like if you're identifying yourself as the center rather than the peripheral, then you understand that the fear is there, but it's not part of me. When you understand it on its in the whole, yeah, that what is the fear about, as we had talked about it before. The fear is about losing your identity, which we call death, if it happens at a certain level. When you lose your identity at a certain level, it's called death. So Why do we fear anything? One is pain, another is death. So when we are so much attached and entangled with the body or the mind, then we have all these fears within ourselves. When we're not entangled with it, the fears may be there. It's fine for the fears to be there. But when you can look at the fear from afar, you realize that it's just like any other thing in the world. Yeah? It is a fear, it is true, it's something that is there, but you don't need to get attached to it. And when you're not attached to it, you can do something, allow the fear to be, and do something. And that's what we call courage. Allowing the fear to be, still doing it, still doing that which scares you up. Yeah? But one thing that I'm trying to do in the middle there is trying to separate yourself from the fear itself. When that happens, you transcend above the fear.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Next up is Evanik, followed by Cecilia. Evanik.
Hi, Yogeshwar. Thank you again. I wanted to talk a little bit about the desire, and you brought a new perspective to it tonight when you said it's looking at the peripheral is great as being greater than yourself. And the reason why you desire things because you think, or the reason that you have desires is because you think those desires are greater than you. And I thought that was so profound. And, you know, and you also described it as looking at the periphery is greater than you. And that's why people get so angry when they don't get their desires, or when you said, or when someone is taking away their desire. And my question, and I'm trying to still form it in my head, is I know that you're saying that we shouldn't desire, right? Or are you saying that? But I guess the real question that I have about desire is, can desire be or should desire be a motivator? Like, is it something that you should work towards, or should you just do the action anyway and not worry about the desire? Like, I'm still a little confused about the desire part, even though I think what you said is profound, but still tripping me up a little bit.
So normally, even in our world, like, we don't have an experience that any action can happen without desires. That's why I also put the point that Shastra are also people as well. Like, if you can be around a person who can do any action without a desire, you get to see what it looks like. Because how one example I like to give is, like, for example, love. If you've never seen people falling in love, yeah, if you've never seen what happens when people fall in love, it's really hard to get the concept. Like, you may be able to know it logically, like, fine, it's okay, something happens between them. But what love is, you'll never know. Even though you've not fallen in love, but if you see other people who have fallen in love, you kind of get the concept, what it feels like. It's not that you'll get it fully, but you kind of get the concept, what it feels like. That's why in Indian tradition, not everything is gotten through words or through, like, just through knowledge, just through talks. In Indian tradition, things are gotten through practice as well. Practice and being with people who have reached. That helps a great mile. Because to understand some of these concepts, you need to experience them, maybe not firsthand with your own self. Maybe you've not yet reached there. But if you can see them in another person, then it's really easy to grasp it, even though it's not really getting the concept, but you're able to kind of get it. Now, getting to what desire is and how you look at desire, whereby you can't do any action without desire, getting attached to the desires or getting attached to the action. What I could say about that is that when you have any action in front of you, look for the essence of the action itself. Like when you're reading a book, yeah, don't look at the desire of finishing the book, because the finishing of the book will happen in the future. And when you're always looking for the finishing the book, you'll never be able to enjoy the book. This is just an example, yeah. So an example of karma that can be done, something that we know normally. It may not be the perfect example showing nishkama karma as it is, but just an example to give the test. If you're reading a book and always worrying that I have to finish the book in 1 week, you'll never be able to enjoy the book as it is. Well, while you're reading the book and you don't even notice how many pages you've read, there is something in the action that has its own essence within itself. There's nothing that you want to get out of it in the future. What you're getting out of it is right now, as you are reading. So any action that you can do that in, this is just an example that can show the way towards nishkama karma or that karma yoga. And since we all read books, since we're in this meetup, we must be reading any kind of books at any point in time. Putting into perspective, when you're reading a book and you realize that I don't know how many pages I've read because the book is so interesting, there is an essence to it itself rather than something that you want to get in the future. Start doing such actions. And another thing is start doing things that show your own hobby, that show your own talent. When you're doing something that shows your own talent, you don't count the hours that you've used in that hobby or your talent. You don't also look at what will I get out of the talent. You don't look for the money that you'll get out of the talent, or you don't look for the fame that you'll get out of the talent, because those are all other desires. What you do when you have a talent and you're working towards the talent is the talent for itself. You do the action for itself, for the essence of the talent, not for the essence of something that is going to come in the future.
Wonderful. Excellent. Excellent, Yogeshwar. Thank you. Next up is Cecilia. Cecilia, go ahead.
Swamiji, please apologize for the ignorance, but understanding is attempting to come. So if I understand correctly, when what Krishna is talking about to Arjuna is, in order for us to be enlightened, to reach enlightenment, which is precisely to dispel the lust, the anger, the greed, the desire, the attachment to outcomes, is that we have to take care of the psychological mind that has us bound in ignorance. And in order to do that is precisely to understand that we are not the body, we are not the thinker, we are not the thoughts, that we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are awareness, or we are life living through us, living itself through us, awareness manifesting just at each and every moment. And therefore that is what is going to bring us to that center, and that center is the ultimate awareness of enlightenment. Am I correct in seeing it this way, or am I in error? Please, I would appreciate your guidance.
Yes, so sometimes what I would like to say, this is just something that happens so frequently that I just need to point it out. Sometimes when we give names to something that we want to get to, like maybe Atman or Brahman or consciousness, awareness, what happens is we get it through the word, like what it means or what it may mean, but then we never get to the essence of it. Like when we are able to say sorry without the essence or say thank you without the essence, we slowly forget the essence of what it was truly meant for. So if we are doing what has been explained, leaving all these three behind, and then going towards something that is beyond the mind and the body, I would like to keep it just like that, like just going beyond that. While we're, if we say that I want to get to the consciousness that is there, then sometimes it may be that you feel you've gotten to the consciousness, but you just miss the mark. Or you feel that you've gotten what consciousness means in words, but you still miss the mark. So something that is beyond what we know as manifest is something that is totally unmanifest, is what we have to get towards, which is the center.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. Next up is going to be Joe, Rupali, and Jyoti. Joe.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. This has been a really important chapter for me because it's given me a new perspective on desire. And in studying a lot of Stoicism, as I have, desire and understanding how the discipline of desire is actually critical in order for us to interact with others. And to not let them dictate our actions. One thing that I'm kind of taking away from this that I think is really important as well is the idea of authentic relating. When you kind of are, you're getting to the essence of something, like if you're saying I'm sorry about something, you actually meaning it. There's a distinction between actually meaning it and authentically engaging with your emotions and actually acting in the world in a meaningful way, because you're getting to the essence of what you're actually how you're trying to act in the world. So that's something that has come up for me. I have a question, but I don't know if Shrikant is going to let me put it through, because
Go ahead and ask the question and we'll find out.
All right. So if either of you say no, that's fine. So my question is, you've sat in on a couple of the young meetups, and I was going to ask if you had any opinion about how the Bhagavad Gita, how Hinduism has influenced young directly, and specifically how it deals with the shadow.
Sure. Yogeshwar, if you want, you can answer it. If you don't feel comfortable answering, you don't need to.
One thing I would say is that I've not read much about Jung. I've only read as much as the three summons that we read before, and this one chapter that I've read. I'm not reading ahead, so I've not read Jung that much to make any conclusion at this point. So I would like to reserve my conclusion for now.
You will share at some point, right? I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah, surely we shall.
Yes, as soon as he's done reading Jung, which is going to be 75 years. Sorry, just kidding. Next up is going to be Rupali, followed by Jyoti. But that's a great question, Joe. I mean, it's a very fundamental question. It is very deep question, and I'm certainly, thinking about that. I'm thinking about what is it that Jung gets about Bhagavad Gita, what version of Bhagavad Gita he's understanding. He seems to be getting the dualistic version, which is very different from the version the Advaita approach that we have been approaching. He himself is very much Advaita oriented. He's very much about integration. But whenever he thinks about other thoughts like Bhagavad Gita or Bible, he seems to think that it is primarily dualistic, that they think it is dualistic. So I don't know what's going on there. So I look forward to exploring that. And I think I will be ready to talk about it before Yogeshwar, because I've just read Young more. So at some point, definitely. Great question. Next up is Rupali and Jyoti. Folks, anybody is welcome to ask any question. I just keep things on the topic. That's the only thing. And I also try to make sure that I or myself, answer questions that we're comfortable answering. Many times the best answer is, I don't know. And so Rupali, go ahead.
So I wanted to kind of just talk about the end of the chapter where Yogeshwar, you mentioned when you're in tune with your own swabhava, then the world will be in tune with you. And that is so profound. It's when you're at the center, but it is so difficult to do that. So when you're especially in a situation that is difficult, then how can you stay in tune with your own swabhava, not allowing the distractions of the periphery to affect you, so that you can get through that situation properly? So that's a question about being in tune with yourself.
So if we're looking for something that helps us right now, then there are so many different ways that most of us really already know. Like maybe just letting some things go, just letting them go by, or even understanding the situation of the other person, why they are doing such things in such a situation. So there are many ways of approaching this while we have not yet reached the center. And these many ways, they are just trying to say that just leave what is at the peripheral as it is. You may not be at par with it, yes? Not because not everything that comes from outside, you can really control it, that you can be at par with it. And this will always happen. You will have some thought, another person will have another thought, because we all have individual lives, individual thoughts. So respect the individuality itself. Respect that if I have a thought, another person also has the right to have a thought. If I have the right to do any action, another person has also the right to do another type of action. That because what they will do is what they think is right, and what we will do is what we think is right. So until we're in the peripheral, something like that may help. But what I would like to caution is, these things are like, they help you for now. Like, for example, somebody will tell you that, how should I not get angry? Somebody will tell you count 10, like, until you do any action. Or somebody will tell you, stop your breath for about 10 seconds, and then it will go down. So sometimes what happens is, these things are for the short term, and we need to understand it. They are for the short term. They do help, and they have practical essence to themselves. But if we only get stuck to them because it's working, I don't need to go past it, then it becomes a problem. We get attached to it. We can't go beyond our anger without doing these small practices. What needs to happen is, we need to know our own swabhava as it is, and be able to control what happens within ourselves to the fullest. Because what we realize going on this path is, one thing that we can absolutely control is something that is happening within ourselves. Something from outside us, we can't really control it, because there's so many forces from the outside. If we can control what is from within and allow it to happen from our perspective, because we don't want to get angry, but we get angry. That's not allowing it to happen with our perspective. Allow it to happen with our perspective. Allow it to happen how you want it to happen. Then what will happen is you have the remote control of your internal, your emotions, your thoughts within yourself. It's not like you want to go to sleep at night and your thoughts don't allow you to sleep. It should be like, if I want to sleep at night, I will just leave my thoughts alone and just go to sleep. That's what should happen ideally. Like everything should be in your control. The remote control should be in your hand rather than the hand of the peripheral, which is the mind or the body.
Yogeshwar, I want to ask a follow-up question. This concept of swabhava is a very beautiful concept. And if you look at it, if you step back and look at it, like the Bible doesn't talk much about swabhava. The focus is not that much on your own nature. And Tao Te Ching doesn't focus much on swabhava. So can you talk a little bit about what swabhava means? What is the conjugation here? And what is the importance of this concept in Gita?
So the importance of swabhava in Gita is that what swabhava is something that, for example, we have this body with ourselves, yeah? There is a different kind of manifestation that will happen out of this body. Even though we all go to the same school, or we all live in the same neighborhood, still we'll have this type of individuation, like we'll have our own swabhava, all the people. Regarding that we're all different in that way, what Gita says is, look for what is different. Yeah, look for what is special to you, because what is different doesn't necessarily divide you from other people. What is different is special within you. That's what you need to know. That specialness is like your talent. And in Bhakti Sampradaya, they call it anga. Now, what anga means is it's part of you. It's like your hand. Your hand is called your anga. So that swabhava is part of you. And don't allow it only to differentiate you from others. Rather, allow it to be special to you. It's like a special tool that you use that nobody else has. And now that special tool, you'll use it to get towards your own, the principle itself. Yeah? And that will be like your own made path to get towards the principle, which is like specially made for you in a way, because you have this special kind of talent within your own self. And realizing it is not, because normally we'd feel like realizing what is different in you will split you from others. But how Gita uses it is identify your speciality, which is it is a difference within you, but it is something special and it's something colorful, like a talent. Not everybody has the same talent to the same extent. So use it now to get towards the principle.
Yeah, wonderful. I really love this concept of swabhava. Swa means your, and bhava is nature or the feel. So what it is saying is that know yourself. That is something very, very precious. Just, know yourself, accept yourself, and work with yourself. Even the 4 yogas is all about that. Understand which paths appeal to you. So look at the loving care with which Krishna is treating Arjuna. And that is the same kind of care that Gita is treating individual human beings. He's saying, Krishna is saying, understand yourself, work with yourself, see what works for you. There are multiple paths. We are all individual, and we start with that. Wonderful. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Cecilia. Jyoti.
Yeah, Yogeshwar, and Shrikant, I think it is pretty much related to Gita. It may not be chapter 16, but it is related to Gita. Yogeshwar, I understand the concept of doing some action without getting attached to the fruits. What is it that a person is doing while praying to God? Is he not expecting raksha, protection? I mean, is it an expectation, or, it's a feeling good of what you're doing, but there's a reason why you're doing that. People pray for a reason. And you yourself had said that it gives you powers. You are getting powers and you are getting protection. So is that not attachment to some kind of expectation?
Yes, so there is only one perspective that we give to if something is greater than us and we want to get to it. One perspective is like, it has been said that we get there, and one perspective is that we do everything in our reach to get there, having that as our goal. Another perspective to look at it is that whatever is said within the Gita, or even any other scripture, see it as a landmark, like it is like a milestone. Allow it to be, and know that when I reach there, this will happen. So I know that I have reached somewhere. Not that I have to keep it in mind, that I have to desire for it, but just because it happens on the way that it is written in the scriptures. And another perspective I would also like to put onto that is, know that it happens. Because siddhi, like greatness or anything in this world, or even in going towards the ultimate, which we have discussed in Sattva Gun, which may also bring diversions on your path. So why Krishna is saying this is not because you have to get attached to it, but rather know that this is going to come on your path. And when you know, you're well prepared for it, not to get attached to it, but well prepared to go beyond it. And those different perspectives are what sometimes are missing from our lives. We only feel that if something is put at the road, it's only for us to desire. But look at it as a milestone rather than something for us to desire. We'll get to the milestone and just pass it. We'll use it to know, like, maybe how many kilometers are remaining, but we won't get attached to it. We won't get to the roadside and say, oh, this is where I have to reach. So use all these desires as a milestone, that when I reach there, something like this will happen. I don't need to desire it, but it will happen. And sometimes we need to know it because it may disturb us in our journey. So just to know that it will happen gives us another perspective of our journey as well.
Thank you. Next up is Cecilia.
Okay, so Swami, you were mentioning before about, knowing the words does not mean that one has reached or understands the ultimate. So I'm asking you, from all the pointers that you have gathered from the scriptures, and I think here also well encapsulated by the Bhagavad Gita, not just in this chapter, but the whole Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, all the pointers that you have studied and have been fortunate enough to be exposed to, what is the best advice that the scriptures are giving us, that these enlightened beings are giving us, so that we can also become free. We can become liberated too. May I ask you that, please?
So that the greatest advice about all the scriptures, something like this, is this path is something that you have to walk on your own. Like it's a path that is as narrow as a way that can only be walked by one person. So it's a path for your own self. What you need on that path is something like not getting attached anywhere. And another thing, so if I could put it in one word, is just knowing the greatness of the center. When you know the greatness of the center, then nothing else can disturb you on the way, which is called Mahatmya in Sanskrit. When you know the Mahima or the Mahatmya of the center, then whether it's Kama or Krodha, it won't disturb you on the way. And you'll definitely reach where you have to reach. And even when I'm saying that you will reach where you have to reach, know that there's no place to reach. Like there's no physical place to reach. Even like this is just metaphorically, like you're going to reach where you have to reach. But there's no real place to go. Everything is here and now. If you, and even like mentally, there's no place to reach. We are there in a way. We are part of the unmanifest. It's not that we are in the manifest, now we have to go to the unmanifest. We are there. There's nothing different about it. And there's nothing like so out of the world about it. Everything is here. And all we have to do is just go in the right way.
So how do we know the greatness of the center? How may we know? How may we know the greatness? What are the practices? What are the pointers that Krishna gives and others have given? What is the roadmap for knowing the greatness of the center? How may we know that?
The roadmap is your own Swabhava. According to Gita, Gita will say the roadmap is your own Swabhava. That special talent that you have, that is so special to you that nobody else can copy it. It's yours. Yeah. And when you get to that special talent that is only yours, you're able to get it to the center. That takes you to the center. That takes you towards the unmanifest.
So let me add a couple of things. I mean, I think the thing that really distinguishes Gita is, first thing is that it says that there are multiple paths. That there are many, many paths to it. And you are simply going to your own core. So all it is saying is that there is a very beautiful saying in Marathi. It says, "Tuze ahe tuza pashi, पण जागा विसरलाशी." So that means whatever is yours is actually yours. You are already there, but you're forgotten. You're forgotten the place because you're looking elsewhere. So it's two-part. I mean, one thing that distinguishes Bhagavad Gita is that it says there are multiple paths. And second is that you have to focus on your own core relentlessly, using whichever paths. I mean, one thing that I really find amazing is that when I see Krishna talking to Arjun, you know, he's never telling Arjun, do this. He's always saying, if you would like to do this, this is the way. If that doesn't work for you, you can do it this way. If you go this way, it is a little slower. If you want to go faster, it is this way. This seems to be a better way, but don't listen to me. Listen to the core of you. Learn to focus on the core of you. And then whatever it says to you, do that. So it's a very different kind of a prescription than what is there in the West. Wonderful. Thank you. Great question, Cecilia. Folks, go ahead. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome. to do that. I think Yogeshwar will need to go soon, but I would love to hear more from anybody. So I would love to talk more. So if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to bring them up. So we are on we have finished chapter 16, so only 2 more chapters left. The 18th chapter is very long, and 17th is one of my favorite chapters. It has one piece which is about the Om Tat Sat, which is one of my favorite parts of Gita. And folks, go ahead, make whatever comments. Let's go with Evanik, followed by Jyoti. Evanik.
Yeah, some of the takeaways that I've gotten from tonight, especially with desire, when Yogeshwar explained it, I really got the impact of that. And the most profound thing that he said, well, in my opinion, the most profound thing that he said about desire is the example he used of finishing the book. And so and I've been in those situations where, you're in a college course and you got to finish the book to write the paper. You don't get the enjoyment out of the book. You're absolutely right. And then if you go back and read that work later, just for, your own pleasure, your own knowledge, and you don't have a deadline, it's great. So when I was thinking of that and I was thinking of desire, I see now why, the desire, like Joe said, you have to discipline your desire. And the reason for that is because then you're just focused on the goal and you're not focused on the growth that gets you there. And so if you take the action and not worry about getting the desire, but work towards the desire, I believe that you get so much more from it. So I think it's starting to click. I love the part where you said love is at the center, and it helps you to know the greatness, and love is knowing the greatness of the center. And to me, just overall in the Gita series, like this concept of the center has been profound in my life. And I've been constantly observing whether or not I am operating out of the center or from the periphery. And, obviously it's probably more from the periphery, but knowing that I can change the motivation that I'm working from. And I question myself all the time when I notice that I'm operating out of periphery. I'm like, what would happen if I operated out of the center? Like, what more would I get from it? And it's part of that desire that you were talking about. And operating, like if I'm operating from the center, I'm not so much worried about the goal. I'm just kind of worried about my concern, or my focus, I should say, is just doing the best job that I can. And really just looking at what the goal is truly. And like, for instance, in my job, the goal is to help people, right? The goal is to help the lawyers I support, and the various different the various different areas that I support. And if I were to look at it as the ultimate goal, right, or the desire was to make money, which is why I took the job to begin with. But operating differently off of that really does help. I think that's all I have, because the consciousness thing I'm still pondering. And I love the last part where Yogeshwar talks about scriptures also being people. I never looked at it that way a day in my life. I always think of scriptures as written, but I think that's a beautiful concept. Look for the person who embodies what you desire, like who embodies what your ideal self would be, and look at that and treat that as scripture as well as written scripture. So that's it for me.
Wonderful. Great. I want to comment on 3 things. One, the first, what you talked about first, this experience of getting completely engrossed in what you're doing, not focused on the results, but focused on the action itself. The there is this entire concept of flow that Maritza and Joya have been doing meetups on. That's exactly the same concept of that experience, the flow experience. The second, it is very, I'm glad that, I think for me too, the center has been amazing concept. But the thing that takes the cake is Rupali's school. Rupali has been talking about this to kids, and they're like 4 and 6 year olds are saying, okay, I was not really operating from my center, when I did this, when I said this to this person. So that I was completely blown away by that. And the last one is, seeing the other person in action as scripture. That is the value of karma yoga. So it's like the jnana yoga is when you're reading and trying to understand things intellectually, but when you see someone in action, that is karma yoga. Wonderful. Jyoti, Joe, and Cecilia. Jyoti.
Yeah, my question is more or less on the same lines. The question is, when you are operating from your center, and you don't even know you're you're operating from your center, because that's all you have, and that is what it is. And you end up helping some people. And when they come back to tell you that how they were helped by you, because you were not because they know that you are working from your center, because they think that that's the way you are. Is it all right to feel good about it, or just stay aloof, indifferent about it?
That's a very, very good question. So there is, I don't know which chapter where Krishna talks about this. He's saying that, look, you have to be focused on the center. But even kind of saying, okay, I am this far away from the center, that means you are attached to your current position with it. So it's like you simply do what you think you should be doing. And that is far more of a reward for you, actually doing that, actually acting, than acknowledging that you are. Because the thing is that the journey towards the center is an infinite journey. No matter where you are, you're always, you can keep going closer to it, but there's always more. The center is very deep concept. So you can be, it's like, we're children of God. We are going towards that. So it's a continuous journey. And the focus, Naneshwar puts it very beautifully. It's like the people who are like Naneshwar, they are just so engrossed with the center that they will keep telling you, no, I'm not there. I want to be there. I wish I could talk. I can't talk. I wish I could be, I could. And they are at a level much, 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 much higher. So there is a level of humility that comes with that. And because all you're trying to do is to be there, in as deepest way, as most profound way, as continuously as you possibly can. So that as best as I understand it, that's the focus.
That was not my question. Sorry. My question was, when somebody appreciates that something, let's not use the word center, let's use the word heart from devotion. Somebody comes back to appreciate what you had done out of devotion, good karma, or whatever you had done for the other person. Should you feel good about it? Or you should just say, that's just part of me, and I really should not take credit for anything?
I don't know if I can answer it anyway. So I'll leave it that as a question for you. Okay. Thank you. Next up is Joe, followed by Joe, Cecilia, and Mike. Joe.
Yeah, I think from this particular chapter, more than anything, it just actually kind of hammered home the how to essentially achieve true wisdom. That's what I kind of got out of this particular chapter. And in the sense that how he described the desires, or meaning Yogeshwar, how he described our desires and our relationships to them. I can relate them to Stoicism, but he went much deeper, much deeper. And then he integrated the divine concepts into desires. So that's what I mean for chapter 16. I think that and then there's, because from there you can kind of see the relationship with the God and self within that framework. So for chapter 16, it was, I mean, 15 and 13 are very hard, 13 in particular, because it gets into the idea of self-realization.
Mhm.
But this one was actually very meaningful, in practical, in a lot of different ways. Those are just thinking about it over the just from a meta level, that's essentially what I took away, as that you started to see some of the ideas of integrity, authenticity, and compassion and courage, and some of those things as well, some of the virtues that became a lot more clear in this chapter. But I think the divine aspect of this, and I'm still going to be mulling that over for a while, because last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, I asked Yogeshwar how it was to make a distinction between rational and divine. And he went into a very deep response, and I have to actually go back and look at that video. So anyway, it was a good chapter.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing I would say about Stoicism and Indian thought is that I think there is a lot of similarity between these things. At the same time, I think the Indian mind has focused on the consciousness for a lot longer. So just the exquisiteness of details of the dynamics of desires, all of that stuff that is there in Bhagavad Gita, I think is at a level deeper than Stoicism. Stoicism is much better at dealing with the external world. How do you deal with it properly? There, Stoicism is just amazing. And it relates to the point that we were seeing yesterday, the point that Carl Jung made, that the Western world is focused more on externals and the Eastern world is focused more on the internals. And so that's a great observation. Thank you. Next up is Cecilia, followed by Mike. Cecilia.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Shrikant, for holding these extraordinary sessions. I go back, I haven't been often, only twice now, but I'm so replenished, so I'm going to join some more. So I want to thank you. I also want to thank this other lady who has brought this to her very young students about the center, and it's made me think that I have to bring it to my students again, my older, because I teach older students when I start up again next year, because the first time I read the Bhagavad Gita was a long time ago. And then the second time I read it again because I wanted to use a novel written by Stephen Pressfield, from which the film The Legend of Bhagavans was made, and the novel is called Golf and the Game of Life. And of course, Pressfield based it entirely on the Gita. And the character played by Will Smith is Krishna. And Arjuna is this poor young man who's been in the war, right? And who has lost his authentic swing. And so now hearing this, and I want to thank you because it really brought back to me that what you've all been talking about, the center, and I should say the Swabhava, I should really say not the center is the ultimate, but the Swabhava really is each of us has an authentic swing.
Yes.
So I hope
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes.
I hope that it is the same thing, because this is exactly how it just has now come into my mind, following all this discussion and hearing everybody. And I really want to thank you. Thank you so
No,
much.
thank you. Thank you. I think the authentic swing is a very beautiful way of describing it, because that's how Swabhava feels like. That means whenever you're acting in accordance with your Swabhava, it's like you're singing in your natural voice. You're moving in a very natural way. So wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Mike. Mike, go ahead. Mike, your mic is not working.
The concept of East versus West is brought out in several dimensions of this. In particular, the concept of what's going on now versus thinking about too much about the future or the past, and how the West versus the East handles this. Now, both Kahneman and Eckhart Tolle got something out of the East toward that, and they described, in particular, Eckhart Tolle considers now to be a single point. Now, Kahneman considers kind of a bandwidth of what constitutes now as having a certain defined width. And he brings that to differentiate the remembering self versus the experiencing self, and how the two selves put together. And he credits some of this from the from his understanding of the East, and he was educated in the Middle East, which is halfway between East and West. So what do you think about? What does this give you in terms of a bandwidth of now being a single point, and now being experienced versus contributing? The experiencing versus the contributing to memory.
Wonderful, excellent question, Mike. Unfortunately, time is a concept which is incredibly deep, incredibly complex, and I don't think I understand it too well. I would refer you to Yasuhiko's presentation that was last Sunday. Joe, can I request you to find the link to that presentation? It was the most amazing take on time that I've seen. It is towards the end of that. I also want to put in the chat a very odd presentation I did yesterday on the East is East and West is West. This is a series I'm doing on Carl Jung. I'm calling it Carl Jung fan fiction. So I try to talk about Carl Jung, even when I don't understand it that well. I'm trying to bring together what I understand in my own way. So in a more dramatic presentation. So I think you might enjoy it. So I have put that in the chat. All right. Anybody else?
If I may, short continuation.
Just very short, please.
Very brief. I was at those presentations, but I would wonder if Yashiro has some mapping of that to today's thing about his concept of now in this chapter of the Gita.
No, not in this chapter of Gita. No, that's I don't think he has he has focused on that. I think the concepts that he's dealing with are far more advanced in terms of the time concept itself. He's using a lot of concepts from the modern philosophers to talk about that. Chiefly, I think Deleuze is what he uses in this particular presentation. So, all right. Anybody else has any comments that they would like to make? So firstly, I think we're doing very well on Gita. So first thing is that we've got 2 chapters left, 17 and 18. 18 is a very long chapter. So mine and Yogeshwar's estimate is that it will take us 12 meetups to finish them. So what I'm going to do is that we're going to double up on Gita again at some point, probably in a week or 2. We'll start doing it 2 nights a week. We'll continue to do Jung. I'm having a great time with Jung. Yogeshwar is also trying to learn psychology, so it's perfect. And I think there is a lot of interest. We have got some really good Jungian thinkers to come and talk about that. And more, I'm actually enjoying it immensely, because it's giving me a very challenging kind of a medium to talk about, because I'm doing mostly like literary things, because I can't really talk in prose about Jung. So I try to talk in stories and poetries and stuff like that. This Thursday, we're going to be doing a session on stages of life. I want to tell you a little bit about it. I just got done listening to it the second time. It is very profound presentation. What he's saying in brief is that we all have a trajectory. Human beings have a trajectory like this, like the sun. Sun rises in the east, we are born, and it goes all the way, and then there is end of life. So what he's saying is that life is divided into 4 sections. One is the childhood, where you're enveloped by your family, both in the physical context as well as the psychological context. Then there is a period when you leave the family, which begins mostly, partly school, partly puberty, partly going out, finding, setting yourself up in a new job, interacting with the world yourself. So there is that period. So childhood is the first quarter. The second quarter is that when you reach the zenith. And then after you have achieved everything, by that time you have already a family, you have a house, you have successful job and everything. And then around 45, 50, there is this next phase. And then at the end, there is the old age. Now, the profound point that Carl Jung makes is that all these phases have different requirements, and people tend to get fixated on different periods when they are in different parts of life. And like the most common thing is for people to want to be a child again, go back into the womb. They want to be very comfortable. They don't want to face the world. They want to run away from the world. Or they want to just keep doing whatever they are doing. They don't want to be bothered with doing anything else. Or you can get, once you have accomplished something, you can still obsessively keep pursuing those things, though they are not adding anything to your value. He says the first half is you figuring out how to interact with the world. And the second half is you figuring out how to interact with yourself, to go deeper into yourself. So he says, leave aside the childhood and the old age. He says the second quarter, the rising, is all about you integrated into the world. And once you have accomplished that, the next quarter should be you getting in touch with the core of yourself, which many people do not do. They continue to do the same things that they were doing earlier. So it's just a profound set of observations. This is based on his book called Modern Man in Search of His Soul. So we're going to do about 3 such lectures. The third one is going to be the basic principles of analytical psychology. So what is psychology? What is psychology is trying to do? I recommend those meetups very highly. Carl Jung is one of the psychologists who actually has studied the East quite deeply. He's studied mythology quite deeply. He has studied the older conception that people had of the world and of themselves. Modern conception is very different. And it's really, and it's, for me, it is just delightful because his mind is so incredible. So even when I disagree with him in various places, I'm always blown away by the straightforwardness of the questions he asks, answers he gives, the topics he raises. So I invite you to join us on Thursdays for that. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. There is a special meetup this Sunday on fairy tales. A Jungian analyst who is a specialist in fairy tales. She studied this in Zurich, along with the, some of the Jungian scholars. And she is, Muriel McMahon. You can find her video on 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel, in the Jung playlist. She's done one presentation for us on that. I would recommend seeing that. And she's going to be back talking more about that. All right. Anybody else wants to say anything? All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shrikant.
Okay. Bye, everybody.